I'm talking about healthcare reform, because healthcare reform is affecting all of us, no matter what size companies we are. And the goal is that I want everybody here to walk out of here in the next 45 minutes or so, just knowing specifically how it's going to impact your business. So this is not going to be something where I'm going to be dropping on you, a bunch of math and technology, figures, and don't worry about that. I want you to know the issues. Okay, it's a small group, so even as I talk, ask questions, go along. I'll leave questions at the end, but don't be afraid to interrupt me. I talk fast, so I can slow down, but I want to ask questions to make sure that for your specific business, you get your issues addressed. If you guys ask anything that kind of takes me a little bit off track, I'll let you know, and we can take it offline afterwards. Okay, but don't be afraid to do that. The goal is with healthcare reform. And, let me get my thing going. I want to make sure that we all know, is your business affected? And if so, what do you do? Okay. How many of you guys here have more than 50 people employed in your company? Want to know? Okay, a couple people do. Okay, that's good. And then everybody else is less than 50 people. Whether you have more than 50 people or less than 50 people, the Healthcare Reform Act will affect you. So you need to know, it's just going to affect you in different ways. Okay, so first of all, let me just make sure we clear up a few things about the Healthcare Reform Act so you know what some of your questions are and answer. I like to kind of give this quiz. I only have like 10 questions to ask. I'm kind of curious to see if you guys know. True or false, will the Healthcare Reform Act provide subsidies to low and moderate income Americans so they can afford healthcare insurance? Is that true or false? Anyone? It's true. That's exactly right. So it will provide subsidies to low and moderate income Americans. True or false? Will it prohibit insurers, I'm going to use my confidence monitor here, from denying coverage just because of your health status? In other words, with the new Healthcare Reform Act, is there any healthcare coverage that will be denied? No. So that's also true. It's going to prohibit any insurers from denying healthcare coverage to anyone, and that's important to all of us. Number 3, with tax credits to small businesses that offer coverage to employees, are there tax credits available now? The answer is, yeah, they are. It's true. So no matter, if you're a certain size business, and we'll go into more detail about it, and if you haven't done this already, there are specific tax credits where you can get money back for any health insurance that you've already paid. And I'll go through the details on that too. So that's also true. Will it expand existing Medicaid programs to cover low income, uninsured, regardless of whether they have children or not? Is it expanding Medicaid coverage? And the answer is yeah. It is doing that, so that's also true. But here's another one, and this always comes up. The death panel. Is there a government panel under the Affordable Care Act that's going to make decisions about end-of-life care? Yes or no? Actually, it's no. That's false. There is a government panel, and they are going to make decisions about health care, but don't worry, your grandmom in Miami is safe. Everything is okay. They are going to be making decisions for making sure that the health care, the Affordable Care Act, is as managed as well as possible. So it's 18 of them that are on this panel. There's government officials, and there are some people from industry and insurance companies. They're like an audit committee, right? Their whole job is to be reviewing any issues with the Affordable Care Act and the way that insurers are providing coverage and making recommendations and implementing procedures to make sure that it's done in the most cost-effective way. That's what their job is. But they are not a death panel. They are not going to be saying, oh, well, it's just too expensive to maintain this old lady's life, so we got to pull the plug on her. That's not going to happen. It's just an audit committee is how you want to look at it. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. How about this one? If you're an undocumented immigrant, will you be able to receive financial help from the government to buy health insurance? Is that true or false? Yeah, that's false. That's right. So if you're an illegal alien, if you're an immigrant, you don't have the papers, you don't have a green card, you cannot get health insurance here, or at least you can't get help from the government to provide health insurance. So make sure that that's clear. Will it cut any benefits that were previously provided to people on Medicare? So if you've got Medicare right now, or any of your coverage is going to be cut. Again, if your grandmom is getting Medicare in Miami, is she going to be getting any kind of cut in coverage? The answer is it's false. Okay, you're going to continue to get the same benefits under Medicare that you've always gotten. We've only got a couple more. Will it create a new government-run insurance plan to be offered with private plans? It will not. I mean, that's false. And it's interesting. My wife is from England. Is anybody here from England or whatever? She's from England. They have a government-run healthcare system. They have government-run insurance. They have government-run hospitals. They have many doctors that are on the payroll of the government. That's a government-run system. My wife's family, I mean, when they get their insurance, they get it through actually a private plan there. They don't even deal with the government hospitals. But that's truly like a state-run health insurance program and healthcare program. The U.S. government is not doing that. There are no government-run hospitals. There are no government-employed doctors, unless you work for the military. All this is a reform of insurance. What they're trying to do is regulate the system a little bit more to provide that form of insurance. And just also want to be clear as well. This whole discussion, because different people have different opinions about healthcare reform. It's not a political discussion right now. Okay, don't care who you support, who you don't support. Don't care if you're to the right or you're to the left. We all had our chance back in November to voice our opinions. But we're business people and we're business owners. So these are the facts, and we have to deal with them because this is law. And we have to figure out what we're going to do based on how this is going to impact our business, okay? So just to make sure, it's not a government-run health insurance plan. Will it require all businesses to provide health insurance to their employees? The answer is false. You are not. If you have less than 50 full-time equivalent employees, and I'll define that shortly, you don't have to do anything at all. Okay, when it comes to providing insurance, that is. You don't have to provide any health care. You can do it. You can provide it. You don't have to provide it. It's completely up to you. If you have more than 50 full-time equivalent employees, if you decide not to provide health insurance, you pay a penalty. So nobody's going to put you in jail. There's not going to be a gun against your head. You just have the choice. You can provide it or not. And if you don't, you pay a penalty or a tax. Or I forget what they're calling it now. It's either a penalty or... But you got to pay something. Okay? So just make sure that you know it's false to say that it's requiring all businesses to provide health insurance to their employees. And then, of course, Lance Armstrong used steroids when he won the Tour de France. I thought that was false, but I just found out that was true. So I just want to make sure we have that all cleared up. Okay? All right, so this was the promise back on March 23rd, 2010, about the Affordable Care Act, right? $1.1 trillion in cost. And the Congressional Budget Office said, hey, look, over the next 10 years, it's going to reduce budget deficit by $140 billion. Now, that's the big controversy over when people say, like, why are you for or against? Nobody's against healthcare reform, and we all believe that people should have healthcare coverage. People just question those numbers. That's what the whole argument has been. But these are the official numbers. It's supposed to provide coverage for all, 2/3 of the uninsured, and the rest are covered by Medicaid. And here's the big thing. Right now, there are between 30 to 34 million people who are uninsured. They have no health insurance at all. So the way the government sold this to the insurance industry is to say, hey, look, we're going to make a bunch of requirements on you guys. You're going to have to provide all sorts of new benefits and coverage, but we're going to increase your market by 30 to 34 million people. Those are more customers for you who will be buying insurance from you. Now, some critics say, well, if those 30 million people are not buying insurance now, who's to say they're going to buy insurance later, or have the ability to do it? That's one question. And of course, the other question is, even if they decide not to, and they have to pay a penalty, which I'll talk about shortly, who's going to audit them? Is the government going to hire 100,000 auditors for the IRS and fine us? So these are some of the critics about it. But that's how it was sold, is that it's a giant market potential for insurance companies, and this is why insurance companies are saying, okay, we'll go with the more coverage because we have that many more customers coming. And in the end, starting January 1st, 2014, state exchanges are supposed to be set up for all of us, individually or for companies to buy our health insurance. That's going to happen on January. What are their websites? Okay, it's like Amazon for health insurance. You will go to your state exchange, and when you go there, you're going to have choices for health insurance to buy. There'll be a gold plan, a silver plan, a bronze plan of different types of coverages. And individually, you're going to go and make your selection as to what type of insurance you need for yourself, as well as what type of insurance your business might want to need if you're going to provide them from your employees. Does that make sense? Right? And these state exchanges, they're regulated by the government. So in other words, it's a market for the insurance companies. It's the same insurance companies as before. It's Blue Cross and Aetna and wherever else you're getting it. It's the same guys. It's just to participate in those exchanges, there's rules that they have to follow, and the government are the ones that are enforcing that rules, if that makes sense. Okay? So that's what the promise is for the Healthcare Reform Act. Now, something clearly has to be done. Because if you look at this chart, you can see that spending as a percentage of GDP for pretty much everything, even military, even whatever, pretty much projected to be flat except for healthcare costs. In fact, government healthcare costs, they were $1.4 trillion that the government was spending back in 2000. It's now up to $2.7 trillion that the government is spending in 2011. So clearly, they're going up significantly. But this is the big chart. And here's where it all kind of comes down to. I will mention later about the mandate, and the mandate is this, okay? If you're a company and you've got more than 50 people, you're required to provide health insurance or pay a penalty, a tax, a penalty, whatever you want to call it, right? That penalty will be $2,000 per employee, that you're not your full-time employees. So if you've got more than 50 people, you're going to have to pay a penalty. But here's the when you look at what healthcare expense is, back in 2002, companies were paying $8,000 on average per employee. And it's doubled to about $16,000 on average per employee. Now, I'm not saying like the party store of Buffalo is paying this amount of money, but at the same time, this is like Walmart, this is larger companies as well as small companies. On average, it's about $16,000 per employee it's costing. And on average, employers are contributing $11,000 to this. So think about it. Say you're an employer and you're contributing $11,000 to healthcare insurance, and the government says, you know what? If you've got more than 50 people, you don't have to provide healthcare insurance at all. Go ahead and leave it be. You just have to pay a $2,000 per employee fine. What do you think some of these people are going to do? Right? It's an interesting question as to what their decisions is going to be, and that's what it'll be interesting to find. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So, in January 2013, these are all the things that are still open. Okay, remember, it's like this massive legislation. It's like almost as tall as I am, and nobody really had the chance to read it through before it was eventually passed. So it's slowly but surely coming along. But even as we speak, you can see those state exchanges, those websites, well, they haven't even agreed on the designs yet. The Department of Health and Human Services just made their proposals this week as to how those exchanges should be designed. Do you have pretty pictures? Do you have videos? Do you have the interface and all of that? The states are allowed to share Medicare funding with the federal government. Now, that hasn't been decided yet. Those mandate rules, the $2,000 per person, right? If you're, right, all of those rules themselves, they haven't been completely nailed down. Who gets federal subsidies? And if you're in the retail business, certain retail shops, they're still trying to decide how to handle whether or not you've got employees or not. For example, say you've got 10 stores, right? Well, do I have employees at each individual store, or do I have to lump them all together and count them all at once? We'll talk about that. And by the way, the answer is you pretty much have to lump them all together. But, of course, right? So these are still what's open right now as of January 13 when it comes to healthcare reform. But okay. So when you walk out of here, these are the 7 things I want to make sure that you know. I want to make sure you know the timeline. I want to know if you know whether your plan qualifies or not. I want you to understand what this mandate means, how it affects you personally, and how it affects your business as well. I also want you to know if you see, whether these full or part-time employees, I want to talk to you about what they mean by that. See if you're eligible for a tax credit, talk a little bit about the state exchanges so you understand, and I'm going to help you decide what your next actions are going to be. You ready? So the timeline, for starters. And I'm showing you this now because this became effective in 2011. So that means that it's real right now. We're paying for our health insurance now, either individually or for our companies, and these benefits are available to us and our employees. So we know we're paying more because premiums have continued to go up. So if we're paying more, let's make sure we're getting these benefits that we deserve, right? Some of them are like dependent care, the third down. So right now, if you've got kids up to the age of 26, they can now belong to your health insurance plan if they can't get it anywhere else. Okay, yet another reason for them to live at home, but that's a whole other story. So they can be on that. That's part of the law right now. In addition, pre-existing conditions. So up to the age of 18 right now, if you have a pre-existing condition, you can now switch health insurance plans. No problem at all. The companies have to provide coverage. That is what they're required to do. So even if you're up to the age of 18, however, in 2014, that's going to change. It's going to cover everybody. So if you've got a pre-existing condition, there won't be a problem at all. Health insurance companies can no longer rescind coverage right, for anything now. They have to provide certain preventative care, and I'll talk about that shortly. They now can provide wellness program events, and that's through the Department of Health and Human Services. So if you want to run like a wellness program in your company, you can get a grant to help you fund that. It ensures against any unreasonable rate hikes. That government panel that I mentioned earlier, the death panel, they're not really a death panel, but they have to get notified when any insurer raises their rates more than 10% across the board. That's the kind of thing that they're involved in, because then they have to ask, well, why? And is there anything that can be done to reduce those rates? That's what their role is. So unreasonable rate hikes now are scrutinized. And if anybody here has health savings accounts, HSA accounts, government doesn't like them anymore. Why? Because health savings accounts, you can withdraw money pre-tax to help pay for health expenses. Well, the government is looking for ways to pay for this Health Care Reform Act. So they're looking at ways to raise money. So they're limiting health savings accounts, which means that your contributions are limited. Your over-the-counter drugs are excluded, so you can't buy anything that's just over-the-counter. And if you pull any money out that's unqualified, and the rules have changed about that, then you're going to get an extra 20% tax, okay? And finally, there's automatic enrollment in your health plans. These that I have here, and by the way, I'm happy to send you my slides afterwards. These are questions you got to ask your benefits administrator or your CPA to see how they specifically affect you. But bear in mind, all this happened as of 2011. Now, 2012 came along, and there are just three things. Number one is that 1099 reporting. I don't know if you guys remember that or not, but there was this thing going on. 1099s is what you send to any contractors that you paid more than $600 to. Well, there was a rule that said, oh, we're now going to require you to file a 1099 for everybody, no matter who they're independent or not, and we want you to report that to the government. Why does the government want to know that information? They're the government. They want to know, they're interested. They're curious about you. So, but they repealed that law. And the main reason why was because I'm going to send a 1099 to Staples and Amazon and, eBay. I'm not going to do that. So they repealed that. So if you hear anything about 1099 rules, they're all the same as they've always been. But the W-2 rules have changed. And that's effective right now because we're filing W-2s in January. And this is for everybody, whether you've got 50 employees or less or more. Everybody now, when you file a W-2, there's an extra little box where you have to disclose what you paid in health insurance for that employee. It needs to be disclosed to the government. So it's not income, it's nothing taxable, it's just a disclosure on the W-2. Why do they want to know that? They're curious. They're the government. They want to get friendly. They want to know you better. So what happens when you don't? If you miss that, you have to pay like $50 a form. That's the penalty for missing that. If you didn't do it, if you guys filed your W-2s already, and good for you if you did, you can amend it. Okay, go back to whoever did it for you and send out amended W-2s. It doesn't change salaries or anything, so it's not screwing anybody up on their tax returns, but at least it makes you compliant with that rule. Okay, so W-2s. And then finally, as of September 23rd of 2012, whenever anybody is filing their open enrollment period, there's new disclosures they need to make about your health insurance that they need to make to your employees. So you'll find that from your benefits consultant the next time your open enrollment comes along. So that all happened in 2012, but that's nothing. Because now we're in 2013, and this is when it really starts to happen, right? Oh, by the way, a few other things in 2012. Women's Preventative Health Care Amendment, which means that all of this stuff is now covered. I know it's made the news, some of it's been controversial, but it's covered. So free contraceptives and breastfeeding supplies and all that covered under your health insurance. Make sure your health insurance company is providing that. Ask them about that because it's now required by law. In addition, there's a 10% tanning tax for all those people that run tanning companies as well. There's an abstinence-only education. So if you want to provide an abstinence-only program for your employees, you can get funded and grant money to do that. The calorie information. Everybody's seen this in restaurants? Very depressing when you see how many calories are in a Big Mac. We knew it, but I don't need to see that before I buy it. That's required. That's Health Care Reform Act. That's why it's on there, right? In addition, there's grants for parent and coping skills. So if you have any young people that work for you and they're covered by insurance, they can get coverage for visits and counseling for coping skills as a new parent. Also, there's now breastfeeding-friendly workplaces. Bathrooms don't count. This is kind of important. That we actually had, if you have a mother and they're breastfeeding, you have to set up a separate room for them to do breastfeeding. This can't be like a sectioned off room of a bathroom or anything like that. I have a client that got sued by one of his employees because they did set up a separate room area in the employee lunchroom for people to go and do breastfeeding, but then he forgot he had security cameras up on the walls. Oops, yeah, I know. So he got kind of in trouble for that. So bear in mind, this is the law now, so that is something you have to take into account. Unfortunately, nothing to cure baldness yet, but I'm kind of just hoping, keeping my fingers crossed, that this will come along in future years. Okay, 2013, okay, big stuff. First of all, Medicare Part D, prescription drug. If you're on Medicare and you're getting prescription drugs, all of you guys look very young and healthy, so I don't think that's going to apply to anybody that I'm talking to. But just bear in mind for those the older ones, right? However, our Medicare taxes have gone up from 1.45 to 2.35%, particularly for those higher income people, you dirty, rotten scoundrels, higher income, right? There's an additional 2.8% tax on unearned income now to fund health care reform. What is that tax, that 2.8% tax? It's on unearned income. First of all, unearned income does not mean the income that maybe some of your employees think that they're making right now. That's not what I mean by unearned income. What I mean is capital gains, interest, rents, like passive income, right? So including the income when you sell your house. So you know how you sell your primary residence and then you make money on it, you make a gain. Well, maybe back in 2006 you would have made a gain, and then you roll it over into your next house and you don't have to pay any taxes. Now you do. It's subject to an exclusion, but there's a new 2.8% tax on the sale of your house. That's an unearned income. Capital gains tax went from 15 to 20%. Dividends tax increased from 15 to 20%. The itemized deduction ceiling rose from 7.5% to 10%. That means we can just deduct less, which means we pay more taxes. Flexible spending accounts are now limited to $25. You can only take $2,500 a year out of your flexible spending account. See, I told you, they don't like those accounts anymore. And you have to notify your employees in the middle of the year about what your plan is for health exchanges and what they mean to them. We'll get to that soon. But just bear in mind, all of these have taken into effect this year, and they all pretty much relate to the Healthcare Reform Act. So when we heard about all this conversation about the fiscal cliff and all the tax increases that were coming and all, this is kind of where it came from, to fund healthcare reform. In 2014, though, January 1st, it hits the fan. Waiting periods cannot exceed 90 days. Pre-existing conditions now are for everybody. And by the way, pre-existing conditions, it's a good thing, right? I mean, not only for people that have that issue, but for employers, there might be somebody that you really want to work for you, somebody that you can, to hire, and you couldn't in the past because they had a pre-existing condition and your insurance company wouldn't cover them. Now people can move, which is a good thing. In addition, there's new reporting requirements you're going to have to make at the beginning of the year to the government. You're going to have to report every employee and what they make, and their social security number, their health coverage, a whole new form you have to fill out. Why do you have to do that? They want to know. They just want to get to know you better. They're just reaching out, having a relationship, you and your government. This is all just information they want to be aware of. But the big thing down below is the individual mandate and the employer mandate. As of January 1st, 2014, every single person in this room, every single person expoing pussycat costumes out there, they all have to have health insurance. That's the law of the land. We have to have health insurance. If you don't have health insurance, you have to pay a penalty, a tax, whatever the Supreme Court called it, you got to pay something. And what do you got to pay? You got to pay $695 if you don't have health care insurance. $695. Which to some people, they're like, well, it's a couple of Springsteen tickets. It's really not that big a deal. It's only but it's $695 or 2.5% of your adjusted gross income, whichever is higher. So it's bigger than $695 for some people. You can do the math. And remember, it's not buying you health insurance. That's just the penalty that you got to pay. And the plan is now you're going to report that on your tax return, and the IRS will be auditing you if you do not pay or you don't disclose in the right way. So everybody's got to have coverage, okay? In addition, employers, if you have more than 50 full-time equivalent people, will also have to pay a penalty if they do not provide health insurance to their people. And that penalty, it actually starts at $750. So it's $750 per employee, but it goes up to $2,000 per employee by 2019. And the first 30 employees are exempt. So even if you've got 60 employees and you're like, I got to provide health insurance, and you don't, then you got to pay a penalty of $2,000 per employee on 30 of those employees, because the first 30 are exempt. Does that make sense? So it's 60 minus 30 times 2,000. I'm going to use 2,000 as that number. Does that make right? Okay, that's what you have to do. And by the way, and I'll get to this shortly in more detail, but let me just make sure I'm clear about what is this full-time employee. How do I know if I have more than 50 full-time equivalent employees? What's the magic formula? And it's this. A full-time employee works more than 30 hours per week. Everybody starts writing at this place when I say that. 30 hours per week is considered to be a full-time employee over the course of the year. So, if you've got 20 people in your business, for argument's sake, and they're working more than 30 hours per week, they're full-time. Then, say you've got like a ton of part-timers, right? Because, during busy season or whatever, and you're high school kids, whatever the case you're doing, you have to take all the rest of the people and add up all their hours. And when you add up all their hours, I don't know, maybe it's 10,000 hours during the year, or whatever that number is, right? You divide that by 2,080. 2,080 is 40 hours a week times 52 weeks a year. Now, why is it 40 hours a week instead of 30 hours per week? Don't ask, don't know. That's just what the calculation is. So you take all the hours divided by 2,080, and you come up with full-time equivalents. So you might have 31.5 full-time equivalents out of all those part-timers. Does that make sense? So 31.5 full-time equivalents plus the 20 full-timers, you're now at 51.5. You lost. You have to provide health insurance for your people. Does that make sense? However, you only have to provide health insurance for your full-time employees, those making more than 30 hours a week. So don't panic that you've got to provide it for everybody. You only have to provide it for the full-time employees. You got to pay, if you decide not to, you got to pay the penalty based on the big number, of course, the 51 people. But you only have to provide health insurance. That's why when you hear like Walmart and franchises and restaurants, they're like flipping out, because they're like, oh my God, well, we know we've got more than 50 employees, so, but now we're going to be required to provide them with insurance, right? And required to pay for some of this insurance. So they're saying, you know what? When we hire new people, you got to keep it at 29 hours a week. We don't like full-time people anymore. They're all going to, that's what the argument is all about. Does that make sense? I'm going to get back to this. If you're like me, I got to hear it like 10 times for it to sink in. I'm going to repeat some of this shortly. But that's what this whole mandate is. So, oh, and by the way, starting in 2018 and later years, you're going to reduce your plan benefits to ensure that the plan is not a Cadillac plan. Anybody that has a Cadillac, I don't know why they're using Cadillac. It's like it's 1960 or something. I'd think like BMW or Lexus plan. They're calling it a Cadillac plan. But if it's like a super plan like that with a lot of benefits, government doesn't like that either. You're going to have to pay an extra 40% tax on that because they want you buying plans through the exchanges because that's what they promise the insurance companies all the money is going to be. So number one, understand the timeline. Number two, does your plan qualify? So, do you have 50 full-time equivalent employees? Like I mentioned, no. You're golden for this, right? No health insurance requirement at all, no penalties, and there's a tax credit available to you too. So that's good to go, right? So don't worry about it. If you have more than 50 full-time employees after doing that calculation, not only do you have to provide health insurance for your full-time employees, but you will now be required to pay 60% of their premiums. So now, like if you provide health insurance to your employees, it's still up to you. First of all, it's up to you if you provide it, and then it's up to you how much you want to contribute. So I'll match it, I'll pay 50%. You've got to pay 60% now of their premiums. And by the way, they're individual premiums, not for the family coverage, not for dependents, just for the employee. So again, if you're like Walmart or some big franchisor, they're like, oh my God, now I've got to not only provide it for those people making 30 hours a week, but now I'm by law, 60% of their coverage as well, of their premiums. That's why they're flipping out about it, right? Or if the employee's premium payment cannot exceed 9.5% of what they're making from you. So if that is, you got to make up the difference. Okay, so that's the calculation you got to do if you have more than 50 employees. If you are so unlucky to have 200 employees or more, God forbid, you have to pay 72.5%. That's the bottom line, right, of the cheapest individual health plans are 65% for family plans. If that's now we're bringing in the families if you've got more than 200 employees. So that's the question you got to ask your benefits person. So we determine if your plan qualifies, less than 50, greater than 50. Is everybody okay with that? Like where you fall? Want to make sure you know that. So got to figure out that mandate. I talked about it before, so let me repeat it. Beginning 2014, everyone must have coverage, either purchased or through an exchange or whatever, okay? By 2019, the penalty is, right, $695, 2 Springsteen tickets in Philadelphia, or 2.5% of your adjusted gross income, whichever is higher, right? By 2019, it goes up to $2,000 per employee for employers with the first 30 exempt. So if you got more than 50 people, it starts at $750 an employee, but it goes up to $2,000 by 2019. But the first 30 you pull out of that calculation. So, for example, if an employer, this is the bottom, next to the last bullet, if an employer has 75 full-time employees and 30 get their insurance somewhere else, so what? You still have more than 50, you have to still provide insurance. Even though they're getting it from elsewhere and their spouse's plan or whatever, makes no difference, you still got to provide it. And again, you have no requirement to provide health insurance to part-time employees. Those are people working less on average 30 hours per week. And say it's Halloween season and people working all these hours or whatever, you do it over the year. Okay, so you might be killing them and working them 120 hours a week during that time of year, but then you got to look at it over a 52-week period of that calendar year, and if it averages out to less than 30, they were a part-time person. That make sense? Okay, so that's what the mandate is all about. That takes effect January 1st, 2014. It is coming up. Now, let's go over the calculation again for full versus part-time employees, right? How many employees do you have? Those are the ones you will have to cover. Full-time people are the ones that are covered. Only full-time. Then you calculate how many full-time equivalent employees you have. Those are the ones you're going to figure into that over 50. So just running through that really quickly. Oh, by the way, this who is full-time and who is part-time, right? This is just to say that some things are still being discussed. You exclude, if you're an owner of the business or any family member, not your cousin Vinny, but your sons, your daughters, your direct family members, they get excluded from this calculation. And here's the other question. Some people here might have multiple stores if you're in that business, right? Or multiple locations. So they say, hey, I got multiple locations. Can I just have, I got 10 employees there and 15 employees there and 10 there. Can I just, is it 3 separate places? The answer, of course, is no, because it comes under the IRS rules of effective control. So even though you might have different partners or investors or whatever, do you exert effective control? Are you the man, right? And if you do, and you exert effective control over all those locations, you got to take all those employees and put them under the same bucket, and they're part of that 50 full-time employee calculation, okay? So here's the math. Assume you've got that common or effective control. Say you do have 40 employees who work more than 30 hours a week. Those are your full-time people. Those are your full-time people, okay? So they're there. Now, you've got another 200 hours a week are being worked by part-time workers, by 12 other part-time workers. So 200 hours a week times 52 weeks means there's another 10,400 part-time hours that were worked this year. You divide 10,400 by 2,080. And when you do that, you come out with 5 additional full-time equivalent employees. 5 plus the 40 means you have 45. Whew, you're under the 50. Does that make sense? If you had 10 additional full-time employees and you hit 50, because it's 50 or above, then you have to provide health care insurance to the full-time people. Right? Good? Okay. So that is what the math is for doing that. And that is calculating the full versus part-time employees. Now, let's see if you're eligible for a tax credit, because tax credits are available. If you've got less than 25 full-time employees, those are the guys working 30 hours or more. If the average salary is less than $50,000 a year for those full-time employees, then you can get up to 35 to 50% tax credit, which means that if you paid, I don't know, say you were out of pocket and you paid $50,000 for health insurance last year, you could get up to $25,000 of it back as a credit. What I mean by credit, it means when you calculate your taxes owed, it's, here's what it's owed, and I credit against what's owed. And if it's more than what's owed, you can carry it forward. It doesn't go away. It's like one time or another. And if you file like an S Corp, a lot of it do file S Corp, where the income flows through to our individual, still applies. And remember that because this is a tax credit, it carries forward for a number of years. So it doesn't go away. So bear in mind that tax credit is available for all of us, whether or not, as long as we've got less than 25 full-time people or a $50,000 average salary. Right now, a little bit of the math. Say you've got 9 employees in your business, and the average salary is $24,000 a year. In effect, you're employing Oompa Loompas. But you've got the average salary, $24,000 a year. Okay? And say you're covering all of their health insurance. So you paid $45,000 in health insurance for them that year, right? Because you did, you're going to get a tax credit, 50% of that. $22,500 will go towards your tax credit. One other thing, this existed back in 2011. So we just finished 2012. If you did not take advantage of this in 2011, do it. Talk to your accountant and amend your return. People amend their tax returns all the time. It's not a red flag. The IRS is not going to be banging on your doors. Amend it and apply for that credit so you can get it and get the money back. Now, say you've got 20 full-time equivalent people. So, you're below 25, you've got 20. The average annual wages is a more comfortable $45,000 a year. Again, say you're paying $100,000 in health insurance. You're not going to get a 50% tax credit. It's going to be closer to the 34 to 35% because they reduce it based on wages and number of employees. It kind of starts ratcheting down. But it's still money that you get, which basically means you can get a credit of $34,000 if you paid out $100,000 in health insurance. And by the way, this is whether you've got, for small companies, when people say to me like, oh, I got less than 50 people, this doesn't affect me. Well, it does. It really does. A lot of people don't know that the tax credit is available, and it's money that they can be getting back. So think about that, okay? So that's your tax credit. All right. One final thing I just wanted to put in there. If you go to the right side, in 2019, if you've got 55 full-time employees and you're paying $495,000 in health insurance, you're over 50. So, you got to provide health insurance for your employees, right? If you decide not to, then you pay a penalty, right? And that penalty by 2019 is $2,000 per employee, full-time equivalent employee, excluding the first 30. So your penalty, 55 employees minus 30 equals 25 times 2,000 is $50,000. So you're thinking like, I have to pay a penalty of $50,000, but right now I'm paying healthcare premiums of $297,000. Which one should I'm telling you, that's what the issue is that's coming up. So, all right. Getting ready for state exchanges. As we speak right now, less than half of the states are actually implementing these state exchanges. This is another problem that the government is trying to deal with. They expected everybody to jump on and say, yeah, we love setting up websites. It's a lot of fun. We'll go to, they're not doing that. So half of them are not. Another bunch of them are going to be partnering with the federal government. And 17 of them have just said to the federal government, you do it for us. We don't even have the budget for it. You do it for us. So this has been way more expensive than the federal government expected this to be. But by heck or high water, I can't say hell here because it's a lot of people. By heck or high water, by January 1st, 2014, everybody has to have a state exchange set up so we can buy our insurance. They're going to be called SHOP exchanges, Small Business Health Options Programs, state-run by 2014. Basically, you're going to require everybody can do it. And here's the big thing. They're pools to purchase insurance. So you're going to go in and answer questions about your individual or your company's needs. And then it's going to offer plans, gold, silver, or bronze plans. And these plans will be offered by those familiar names that you already have come to know and love, like Blue Cross and Aetna and whatever. They'll all be there. There will be multi-state plans available, so you've got employees in different states you're able to buy from. And there will also be the availability if you are mentally ill enough to want to have your own co-op plan and join up with an insurance company or somebody else, offer your own self-insurance with other people. They're going to give you the ability to do something like that as well. That's all coming on January 1st, 2014. So, What are your next actions? Let me explain. You need to take action now. Establish a healthcare reform team. Become familiar with the law. Review your current plans. Evaluate your alternatives. Develop an action plan. Basically, it comes down to 3 things. This is what your options are. Number 1, you do nothing. Right? You basically do what I've been doing with my whole life. You just let somebody else worry about it. You do nothing at all. January 1st comes along. You keep your existing health plan as it is. And by the way, all of our health plans qualify under the Affordable Care Act. So you do nothing, okay? This is if you've got more than 50 employees, or less, you just carry on with the way it is. Everybody's grandfathered in. That's option number 1, okay? If you've got less than 50 employees, none of these might apply to you, or they might. It's your decision. Number 2, you can end coverage altogether. You can do that if you have less than 50 people. You can do that if you have more than 50 people. You can just say, hey, look, we're going to end coverage. For all employees, thank you very much. I don't want to deal with the headache of health insurance. I don't want to do anything else. Just go out and get it yourself on the exchanges because they're all available for you to buy. Good luck with all of that. And that way I don't have the bureaucracy in my office to deal with, and I save a ton of money. So even if you're under 50 people and you're providing health insurance, you can just stop it and let people go and buy it on their own. And that way you pay nothing, no penalty. If you're more than 50 people, you pay a penalty, but it's still significantly less than what you're probably paying now for health insurance. Or number 3 is the hybrid approach, which is what I'm seeing a lot of companies seriously consider. Why? Because you don't want to end insurance. These are your employees, right? I mean, they're like valuable people to you, right? I mean, my God, this is not like, whatever. So, you want to provide insurance to your people. You want to do the right thing. You don't want to just set them out on the streets, right? So, but you do want to give them choices. So the hybrid approach is what I see a lot of companies doing. They say, hey, look, we want to cut down on our own internal expense, the administration of this, the bureaucracy of this. We're even willing to pay a penalty because it's still a lot less than what we're paying now, right? So we're going to tell you to go and buy your insurance on these exchanges. Gives you more choice and flexibility. You buy what you want to buy, but we will reimburse you. So in other words, we'll give you a health insurance allowance of whatever dollars that is per paycheck so you can afford to buy your health insurance and you're not out of pocket like you were before. You know what I mean? Nothing will have changed. Now be careful because that's compensation to an employee. So it's got to be tax affected. You don't want to just reimburse them for their premiums because they're going to have to pay taxes on that, so they're losing out in the end, right? But a lot of companies are considering doing just that, just a hybrid approach to give employees the option to do what they want to do. So, for example, Sears is doing just that. They are discontinuing their healthcare plan altogether for their employees. They are saying, here's a flat payment to all of you guys, go out and buy your own healthcare insurance. So you buy it on your own, on the plans, you have your options to do that. Of course, it reflects tax effects, and the employees can buy wherever they want to go. Now, Walmart has the other approach. They are making sure that nobody is working more than 30 hours per week unless absolutely necessary. So when they're hiring new people, they are on the part-time plan. And they are eliminating some of the higher premium plans. But because it's Walmart and they've got tons of bucks, they're setting up their own healthcare centers and giving access to their employees to a healthcare advisor on their pocket. So they're kind of it's like an extra benefit. Look, you're competing against other companies, so you want to attract the best employees. If you got one guy down the street that's offering good health insurance, and then yourself say, no, we don't offer any health insurance at all, just go to the exchanges and buy it, you're going to have to think about how that's going to reflect on you trying to get good people. And those are the decisions that we're all trying to make right now, and those are the issues. So, in conclusion, these are the big benefits that were expected. A drop in premiums, rise in coverage, right? And certainly a lot of coverages have increased, and that's really a good thing. Haven't seen the drop in premiums yet. Small businesses are excluded and get a tax credit, so that's also a good thing. There are business opportunities for growth in the healthcare market. Easier for workers to move from jobs. No pre-existing condition stuff. Easier to budget, particularly if you just pay the penalty. You know what that is every year. So, now you get that, rate adjustment envelope and you're shaking before you open it. And potential less admin for small companies. These are the big problems that won't go away. Just want to make sure that we're aware of them. The potential sticker shock. Right now, if you decide not to have health insurance, you can pay the penalty, $690 or whatever, right? Which is less probably than what you'd be paying for health insurance as it is. And then, God forbid, you get diagnosed with something, you just buy health insurance then. Right now, under the law, you can do that, which kind of blows out of the water all the actuarial assumptions that insurance companies make so that they can make money. And they do deserve to make money, right? So, that's an issue right now that's going to have to be dealt with. Number two, more doctors are opting out of the whole thing because of the requirements. My sister is a doctor, 2 offices in South Philadelphia, thinking of just going all private, no insurance, just pay up, and I don't want a deal. That viability, the $34 million, remember the whole reason why it was sold and why it's going to reduce costs? All these people are going to enter the market, and will they enter the market? And then, of course, the state participation, not only just Medicaid, but also exchanges, they're not participating as much as they thought, so that increases costs as well. So will this result in higher taxes? Will it increase in an increase in healthcare costs, more government involvement? These are some of the questions that need to be answered. Stay tuned. We'll be back next year to give you an update. So here are some resources to walk away from. Blue Cross has a great calculator to calculate your tax credit. If you want to go through that math, it's really easy to do. The Department of Health and Human Services are charged with running healthcare reform, so everything is there. They've got a nice newsletter. The healthcare reform site, the main site is healthcare.gov. The best site of them all is the one on the bottom. Ezra Klein writes, he's a blogger for the Washington Post. He writes a blog called the Wonk Blog, and as part of it, he covers healthcare reform. And this is like a guy, he writes like for guys like me, like no more than 2 syllables, very easy to read, lots of pictures and graphs. Excellent. And you can sign up for his newsletter, so a couple times a week you'll get any updates related to healthcare reform. He'll keep you posted on what's going on in plain English. I love his blog very much. So it is 10:15 and 30 seconds. I wanted to make sure that we get finished on time. What I'll do is this. I will be around for any questions if you'd like to ask anything specifically. One final thing before I let you go. Like I said, I write Forbes, New York Times, Inc., Huffington Post. At the end of each month, because I have a few people that help me out with, we go through so many things online that are written about healthcare reform, the economy, management, marketing, sales, insurance, productivity. I pick 10 articles out each month that I love the most, and I put them together into what I call the Perfect 10. It's a free newsletter. You're welcome to sign up. You can email me or go to my website or give me a business card. You can unsubscribe anytime you want. But I run a 10-person company. These are 10 things I've found during the month that really help me run my business. And I'm more than happy to share them with you as well.